So, I mean, there, I think that we're all worried about this, Judith. What you talk about is original thinking and creativity and innovation. And I think we should be mindful, especially because the creators of these technologies are as terrified as they are excited about what's possible. So we really are in a domain of experimentation. And I hope what we're doing is sharing more of the lessons that we're learning as we go through this.
I create clear thinking and decisive leaders who can amplify their influence. Contact me to find out how I can help you or your organisation. And today our guest is Steve Cadigan. How are you doing, Steve?
I'm doing great, Judith. Good to be here.
It's good to have you here, Steve. Steve, do you have a favourite book?
I have many favorite books.
That is the best answer ever.
Mm-hmm.
What are you reading now?
Right now, gosh, what am I reading now? I am in the middle of a book by Fred Kaufman called Conscious Business.
That sounds
Mm-hmm.
interesting, actually.
Mm-hmm.
And
Yeah,
what
it's
are you
very
learning
interesting.
from that?
That I think there are things you can do to really have more conscious, intentional, candid conversations with your colleagues at work and skip through some of the dysfunction that we often find ourselves in as human beings who tend to disagree and or misunderstand each other. And Fred's an Argentinian thought leader who I've followed for a long time, and he's got some really great advice. And one of the things he says in the book, for example, is why do we say work and life? Because it almost implies that work is not living.
Yeah.
It's my work and my life, and that we're in some kind of zombie state. And I really like that call out because I find in work, and I'm sure you do too, that I feel very much alive in a lot of the work that I do.
Yeah.
And so he said, maybe we need to reframe this whole narrative a little differently. So it's one of the things that I'm looking forward to understanding more in his book.
Fantastic. That sounds interesting. So tell us a
Mm.
bit more about you, Steve.
Well, where can I start? You want me to start from out of the womb or in the professional realm?
In the professional realm would be great. Thanks.
Sure. I started off my career out of school as a history major who had no aspirations of any idea what I wanted to do professionally, and
Right.
found myself as the child of a minister and a social worker who was predisposed to being very suspicious of business. I found myself interested in business, much to my parents' probably disappointment. And I found myself in a company that was looking to rotate people around. It was a small fashion company growing at the time in San Francisco. And the second rotation I had was in human resources. And I fell in love with that discipline very, very quickly.
Mhm.
And the reason was because a lot of what I love about sports, looking at how people handle different environments better and who is paired best with the right kind of team and environment and leadership style. Everything I loved about sports was part of what human resources offered. And so for the next probably 20 years, I worked in 6 different industries in varying degrees of increased responsibility in the world of human resources. I went from fashion to insurance, and then I hit the high tech universe around 1991 at a company called AMD. And that was really exciting. From there, I went on to a company called Cisco Systems, which was growing really fast at the time and did a lot of merger and acquisition integration work, which for anyone in the audience who's been through a merger and acquisition knows it is highly challenging, fraught with all kinds of complexity and emotions. And I found I really liked that kind of crazy environment. And so I did that for about 4 years and worked on 50 acquisition integrations, loved it. And unfortunately, at that time, the dot-com bubble burst, and I found myself in a company that wasn't going to be buying companies for a while because of the lack of cash. And so I went and had my first international opportunity. I ran human resources for all of Cisco Asia, based in Singapore for a couple of years, which I loved. And then when the headquarters called and said, time to come back to California, I said, no, I don't think I want to do that. And I decided to take my own path to Canada. And I became my first head of HR for a small technology company out there called PMC Sierra. That was an incredible adventure. Loved Vancouver. Western Canada is amazing. Suited me really well. And after 4 years of that, my leader, my CEO, my boss decided he wanted to retire, and he was a big part of what made that job amazing to me. So I thought, maybe it's time to try something different. And then I got wooed back to California by a video game company called Electronic Arts, and they moved my family and I back to the U.S. At that point, I'd had three kids because one was born in Singapore and two were born in Canada, and found myself back in the U.S. And then, unfortunately, another big economic shift in the winds hit, which was the second mortgage crisis of 2008. And the job that I was hired at EA to do essentially disappeared. And so I started looking for something different. And that's when I got a phone call from LinkedIn saying, would you be our first chief HR officer? And that was a opportunity of a lifetime for me to build a company from nothing, pretty much. It was 4 years old, 400 people, very small, very early stage. And that was an adventure of a lifetime. So for the next 4 years, I built that company from 400 to 4,000, from 2 offices to 17, from 2 countries to 26. And I went through the IPO and built a culture that even to this day, which is probably about, 12 years since I left, I still feel it's one of the greatest cultures out there in the world of work.
Okay, let me just stop. Let's stop you there. Why do you say the culture is so good? What makes it good?
It's not me that says it's good. It's everyone who works there that says it's good. And I think that's the ultimate measure. I think people feel they're growing and learning more than anywhere else that they've ever worked, that they're feeling like the work makes a difference. They're working on helping a cause, which is very worthy, which is helping people find their true destiny and their career, transformation, if you will. And so when I look at people who leave LinkedIn and the testimonies that they put out there about, oh my gosh, I'm excited to do something different, but this was, the greatest journey of my career. That's delivering on the promise that we really wanted to build back in 2009 when I joined the company.
Okay, excellent. Thank you for
Yeah.
that. All right, then. So I'm interested in what you've said in the past about the need to understand workforce psychology. Tell me a bit about that, because I know, I'm also ex-HR, so I get it, but I understand that a lot of leaders don't think it's necessary. So what's your pitch to them?
Let me clarify where you're coming from here. What's not necessary?
Knowing workforce psychology.
I think I'd be curious to hear why they would think it's not interesting. But I think if you're in any kind of field of work, the way you create value is through the people that work with you, and understanding what can make them deliver something magical, something amazing is worth it. And where they're thinking, how they think about their status in your organization, their stature in life is super important. And I think we have seen more of a radical shift in how the workforce is seeing themselves and seeing their careers and seeing their futures and their lives shaken dramatically by the COVID-19 experience than any time in history. So I think it's really relevant. Let's just take, okay, as a recovering HR leader like me, Judith, we've all been measuring this thing that Gallup has told us is really important for years, which is employee engagement. Okay. Are your employees engaged? And there's 12 questions that Gallup has told us over, the tried and true many years of doing this, that this is really important. And when I look at that measure today, I just don't see that it's adding a lot of value in how I understand my team, because there are more things affecting the engagement of my staff out of my control than ever before. Are my kids being educated properly? My family's living longer. My parents are living longer. What's going on? Am I taking care of them? I'm worried about stuff more outside of the domain than work can be, a part of than any time in history. So I want my people engaged, don't get me wrong, but maybe there's something deeper and more substantive that we should be paying attention to, such as do my employees feel that they're in an environment of trust? Because trust is one of the things that a lot of the great researchers out there, the Brene Browns of the world, the Carol Dweck's of the world, who tell us about growth mindset and so forth, tell us that this is a necessary ingredient for people to do great things. And so those are some of the reasons why I think it's super important for us to be aware of it.
I like that. And I guess the answer to the question is that I notice that when I'm doing training or mentoring, that that there is a huge lack of knowledge in that leadership cadre about psychology and
Hmm.
the until you've actually kind of started to use examples and stuff, there's been no like inherent interest in it because it's seen as a I don't know woo woo fluffy thing, and they've got to get widgets out the door, So it seems like oh maybe that's a HR thing, but it doesn't affect me. So I was kind of curious as to what you thought about that.
Yeah. I mean, I've run into those leaders over the course of my career too. And now I'm going to make a huge leap here, which is an overgeneralization, but I find it increasingly true, which is I don't feel most organizations really put a lot of value in leadership development today.
Absolutely. Even
And
less
that's
so
a,
now, I think, than
yeah,
before.
and it's a big miss, right?
Yeah,
Because your
yeah.
employee experience is shaped by the person they work for almost more than anything, right? And if that's a place where you're just throwing people into the role because technically they're as proficient as anyone at doing it, it doesn't necessarily mean they're the right leader, right? Like every organization I've worked in, every single one, I've wound up having to unravel situations where the technician was promoted to manager. They didn't want to be the manager. They're not good at being the manager, but all the money went to the managers and all the status and all the
Yeah.
accolades went to the managers. So they felt for me to be successful, I have to climb that ladder, which is the only ladder my organization is recognizing and paying more for. And the truth is, not everyone's wired to be a leader. It's not fun for a lot of folks, and so we find ourselves in a situation where that position. This could be a whole nother podcast if we wanted to. I believe what makes a good leader today is very different than it was just 10 years ago.
Oh yeah, yeah.
Um,
100%.
and I have a lot of empathy for leader. I mean, it's really hard, and you get more blame than you deserve, and you get more credit than you deserve as a leader. But truly, I think because of the velocity of the impossible amount of information we have to consume today, leaders are more becoming like information brokers rather than collectors of all the data and decision makers. It's impossible for you to be the decision maker because you're not going to have all the information. So, can I make sure that all the right people have the right information? Is probably more where I should focus my time. But it's a real disappointment to me that we are continue to see, and even these very evolved, very what I think are very thoughtful organizations on the outside, they're not developing leaders. And Judith, let me ask you a question: of all these companies that have been letting people go the last few years, what's usually the first department that's let go when a company's going through a difficult time?
HR.
The
It's
leadership
got to
development
do
people.
HR. It's which is kind of ironic because then because then there's nobody to actually deal with all the issues, and then they go oh, and yeah it's oh I just think it's crazy. What I thought was quite
Mhm.
interesting,
Mm,
but you might not find it interesting, but it fascinates me that Generation Z is saying they don't want to be a middle manager, right? Because I would argue they've seen what their parents have gone through and they're like, no way am I taking that responsibility. And I think we treat middle managers pretty unfairly, really. To say you talk about being in the squeezed middle. But
mm,
if you and I know you look a lot about the future of work. So if we've got
mm.
Generation Z going, yep, no, I'm just not I'm not going to do that. How do you think organizations are going to survive?
Well, I think that's interesting. I've not heard that until just now, that that's a growing perception, or should we say psychological shift that we're seeing in the new generation here. I think my first reaction to hearing that is, well, it's on us to make them see the value and the beauty and the art that you can achieve as a leader, and it's not all downside. There's a lot of, just like I didn't want to go into HR initially because I didn't see any HR leaders that I respected or wanted to be like. And I thought, wow, I don't know if this is for me. I don't see
Yeah,
my
yeah.
people anywhere in the first few organizations I worked for. And it wasn't until I got to high tech, I went, oh my gosh, there's a few people here that I think are phenomenal that I could, okay, now I can see how I can build a career here in a way that I think makes me feel more comfortable. And I feel this era of social media has put a spotlight on so many examples of bad leadership that people are like, yeah, no, I don't think I don't want that stress. And it is pretty stressful, you know? Um, So, but I do think, we're entering this era where, I mean, think about it. I have three boys and they're looking at careers where they can create their own value without working for someone else. They want to
Yeah.
be a
Yep.
YouTube influencer, for example, or something where they're not thinking necessarily that my only pathway through the, value creation and economic independence is to have to work for somebody else. They're seeing more different possibilities, and that's pretty exciting. That's pretty exciting.
Yeah. Do you think so? Here's been a bit controversial, but do you think that organisations actually provide a bad deal for employees or a bad deal for leaders, which is why people don't want to do those roles anymore?
I don't know that I would say that's a huge question. I would say I don't think organizations are setting leaders up for success as well as they could. And a lot of these examples in the last few years, and I've posted a few TikToks about this being very, very critical of some of the organizations where a company will come out and say we're letting people go to the tune of several thousand because they're not performing. And I'm thinking, well, wasn't that your job to get them to perform? Wasn't that your job to hire properly and to educate and grow and coach and nurture? So the fact that you've got 4,000 people that are not performing is their fault. I would say no, that's the senior leadership. Huge
Oh
mistake,
my gosh, you've
you
just
know?
made me think. I wonder if somebody went back and actually said, out of that 4,000 people you're getting rid of, how many of them had a performance review, a one-to-one, or a leadership development plan? That would be so curious because they're the things that HR push for, and a lot the organisation push back, don't they? And say, well, we don't have the time to spend talking to people. And I always think, but you've got
Right.
time to tell them what to do. How come you haven't got time to tell them they've done well? It's just like,
That's right. If I had, a dollar, a pound, a euro for every time a leader came into my office over the course of my career and said, Steve, we're going to have to let Susan go. I was like, well, why is that? Because she's not performing. Does she know she's not performing? Oh, yeah, she knows. Well, how would she know that? Well, because it's so obvious in the staff meetings that she doesn't know what she's doing and she's not meeting her deadlines. And then I would go to the manager and said, have you told Susan that her performance is so poor that you're prepared to fire her? Well, no. I'm like, okay, so do you think you should do that before you fire her? I guess so. I said, yes, you should. And let me tell you why. So if your answer is no, that means it's okay for me to fire you without ever telling you you're performing so poorly that I could fire you. That's called a drive-by termination. Is that the culture that you want here? Right. And, I'm not a huge fan of performance appraisals being just one annual dump of surprises. I am a fan of, and the reason we are always the target of being the evil HR people is because we're the ones that have to go to the leaders and go, you're not talking to your people. Like they don't know how they're doing. And the leaders inevitably will say, well, if I really told them, they would have an emotional reaction and then they really wouldn't do their job. So I think it's just better that I don't, that I don't confront them with being honest. I'm like, yeah, but if you don't, then we're just destined to mediocrity and failure if you don't do that. And I think that, and this gets to, you're triggering me here because I think one of the
can
biggest,
tell.
one of the biggest missing ingredients in business is something so human. And I do think AI can really help with this, which is the capacity to talk about hard things, the capacity to talk about differences around race and religion or political views, differences to talk, around discrimination. We're not having those conversations. And I don't think it's because I think it's more to do with the fact that we're uncomfortable talking about something very, very charged. And I think there's an art to it. And I've been through a fair amount of therapy in my life for a whole bunch of personal reasons. I think that's given me the gift of understanding my emotions and being able to talk even when I'm feeling some emotions starting to trigger me. And that served me really well. And I've had many people tell me over the course of my career, whoa, 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 slow down. What did you just say? When I'm trying to coach someone on how to approach someone else, I said, listen, let's just step back and have this real, unbiased, sort of calm conversation. Let's just be real. Don't you want that? yourself, or you want people to just say, "Oh yeah, great job. Yeah, so you're so awesome. You're so great." And then we're just, like I said, we're really in a race for mediocrity.
I like that. Yeah, that makes sense. But let's listen to a quick advert. As a leader, you know that having a strong level of influence is essential to achieving your goals. But how do you know if you're truly making an impact? Take the How Influential Are You scorecard to get a clear picture of your current level of influence and identify areas for improvement. With personalised recommendations and valuable strategies, you'll be able to amplify your influence and make a real difference as a leader. Don't miss this opportunity to improve your leadership skills. Take the scorecard now at amplifyyourinfluence.scoreapp.com. Welcome back to the Maverick Paradox. This is the podcast for the pathologically curious. Convince me now then how AI can help you have those conversations.
Oh gosh, no matter what your AI partner looks like, whether it's Gemini, Perplexity, ChatGPT, Copilot, if you go in and say, "Hey, here's me. I'm Steve, and I'm a junior manager. I've only been managing a few years, and I'm in this company, and I have an employee that I have to deliver a difficult message to. Here's a little bit of background on the employee. Here's what the situation is. Can you help me communicate this in a way that's not threatening, in a way that's going to try to not put them on the defensive, and in a way that's constructive? Can you give me some advice? And can you be the best coach? Go look at what the best coaches in the world would say to do. And then it's going to spit out some really great advice, like really great advice. I've gone to ChatGPT to talk about some hard stuff with my teenage boys, which I was like, I think I know how to approach this, but maybe I'm just going to go get a different perspective. I'll give you an example. We had a really horrible thing happen in our community right before the school year started. One of my son's good friends took his life, and nothing prepares you for that. The community was devastated, and it happened a few months ago, and we all still are. But I'm I don't know how to talk about this with my son. And he's a teenage boy, and one word is a complete sentence with a teenage boy, like, huh? Under best of circumstances. And now we have this really awful event, which there's no explanation for, and there was no forecasting that his friend was facing anything troubling. And so I went to ChatGPT and I said, help me navigate this. And it came up with some amazing constructive advice. It made me more confident to go have that conversation. And I can't say it was the best conversation I've ever had, but it was better than not having a conversation. You follow me?
It's quite intriguing. It's not something I'd have thought of using AI for.
Yeah.
And I suppose the danger is that you rely on it to do everything. And then when you're in the realness of it all, you're not able to respond. If you're an individual that just doesn't necessarily take the learning and then go, okay, this is what I'm going to do better. But you're someone who just goes, oh, I've got the solution, and goes off. In the realness, in those real moments, it might be difficult to actually deal with it.
Well, Judith, you've just expressed what every university professor is feeling right now. Right? Are my students learning, or are they just conjuring this paper up from some sort of ChatGPT? And so they're arming themselves with how do I AI proof whether this person had an original thought or not, right? And that's interesting. I heard a professor recently tell his class, and I love this approach. This was we were touring a university, and we asked on these tours, because I have my twins are 17 and they're going to go to college next year. And so we asked, like, so how are you guys thinking about AI? How is that impacting the college experience and so forth? And this one tour told us about a professor who said he tells his students to use AI to write the paper and then edit the paper so that it's better than what AI did. And then show him both. Show me the AI did it, and then put your own spin on it. Okay? Now that's cool, right? So now you're saying, don't try to pretend you're not using AI. Use AI and generate the stuff, and now make it in your own voice, right? And the more you make it your own and put your own fingerprints on it, the more valuable your grade's going to be. So, I mean, I think that we're all worried about this, Judith. What you talk about is original thinking and creativity and innovation. And I think we should be mindful, especially because the creators of these technologies are as terrified as they are excited about what's possible. So we really are in a domain of experimentation. And I hope what we're doing is sharing more of the lessons that we're learning as we go through this.
Mm. Yeah, I think so because I think that professor is quite interesting because it's actually harder to re-edit something that's already been done by AI because it can appear to be better. So it's probably harder to do that than it is to write the thing in the first place. But I think if you know something about a subject that you use AI with, you can easily see what's wrong with it. Like, oh, that's logically doesn't make sense, or that doesn't work in X environment. So then you can really use it as a co-pilot to work with. But I think if you have no information, then it's
Right.
very easy to get sucked into, well, this is right, and then all of a sudden everybody has the same kind of responses.
Yeah.
Okay.
Have you played around with it much yet, Judith?
Yes, to a degree. I'm careful with it though.
Mm-hmm.
I might play
Mm-hmm.
with it with my own content.
Right, right. And one good way to test the quality of AI's output right now is to do something like I did the other day. I said, go create a bio on me, or create an introduction for me to give to someone who's, conference I'm going to speak at.
Hmm.
And it's 20% wrong, just wrong, misquoting me. Nope, never said that. I don't know where you got that from. That's not accurate. And so there's still an element of construction, if you will, that we're undergoing with
Yeah.
AI. It's not something that we should 100% rely on. It's just an augmentation right now.
Augmentation is a good way of looking at it because I
Mhm.
have a magazine, the Maverick Paradox magazine, and I've had about 190 guest writers, and we don't knowingly publish AI content, and you can tell what's been written by someone and what's been written by AI. I feel like I'm also a good AI checker now without an AI checker because there's just certain things that read out and then you run it through a checker and it's like, yeah, 90% AI. It's like, yeah, I thought so. And it doesn't have a soul yet. Right.
Mhm.
So it loses, well, it doesn't have the human factor to it. It may technically sound right, but it doesn't hit right, don't
Yeah.
feel. So I think that's one to watch. And I also was working with a client who was saying that their cost to recruit has gone up so much because so many people are using AI to write their CVs and cover letters that they're interviewing people who are not suitable, who would have been, not picked in the days before AI. So it's costing them a lot more money because they're
Mm,
constantly interviewing people who are unable to do the job.
interesting. That's
And
interesting.
everybody's losing out on that scale then because it gets to the point where it's just too costly and they're going crazy trying to figure out how to fix that problem. Um, I suppose I don't know, it just seems like for me it feels like silly because if you go for a job that you can't do and you get the job, then you'll get sacked, right? Because you can't do it. So what's the point? What's the point of going through all the hassle of faking it in the first place? But that's just me thinking it's just a bit crazy. So, what would be really good tips from you then on how to be a talent hacker so that you can get that world class team and not the AI fakery team?
Well, when I look at the landscape today of the world of work, a couple of big trends really leap off the page at me. First, the need for new skills has never been greater. We're going to need
Mm.
new skills faster than ever before. And so if you're looking to hack your way to through your career journey, if you will, I think the most important skill that I can, suggest that you double down on is the capacity to learn new things quickly. We have more people leaving companies faster than any time in history that we've been looking at this. We have more people changing career paths than ever before. And we have more new career paths than ever before. In the last 10 years have been the creation of more new industries than any 10-year period in history. And so that's leaving us with a recruiting landscape, which is shockingly different than it was just 10, 15 years ago. And most companies that I help say that the biggest challenge is finding qualified people
Mm-hmm.
in the time frame of interest, and then hanging on to those qualified people once they do hire them. And almost to the point where 10, 15 years ago, we could find with high degree of confidence someone who's about 90% qualified on the job description. And now that's trending down to 70, 65%. Someone has what we need. And that's leading me to believe that every business is going to need to become a business school, that we're all going to have to be in the business of growing our talent, because the time frame to find someone fully qualified is too long. It's just too long. And so we're going to have to, if we want to keep people, I think talent today is loyal to learning, not to a company. So if you can grow them and make them better for the future, an uncertain future, they're more likely to stay. And that's not meaning to say that you're going to have a school inside your business. That means you're going to have leaders that are going to give you new projects, new assignments, new challenges, and growth experiences and opportunities. And that's not how we've built work. And that's why I wrote my book, Workquake, in 2021. That's why I think we've got a big problem that the architecture of work that we're all used to has not been built for this radical amount of change. We've been used to building teams that are going to stay together 5, 10 years. And now if someone stays 3 years, it's a home run in Silicon Valley. It's just doesn't happen. Most software engineers stay about a year and a half. So, and yet we have some of the most innovative, creative, highest value, market value companies in the world in this domain of Silicon Valley, where the turnover is higher than anywhere else in the world, which has made me rethink, maybe people staying a long time isn't the prerequisite to long-term value creation. Maybe it's okay. And maybe it's actually better that we have new people with new ideas because our markets are changing, our business is changing, and we need new skills. Maybe that's a superpower. And if you look at today, the obvious example in the car industry is Tesla. They're less than 25 years old. Their median tenure right now is 2.5 years, and they are worth more than the next 10 automobile manufacturers combined because the market thinks they can innovate better. And they have not been in this industry for 100 years, like Ford, General Motors, BMW, Mercedes, and Toyota and so forth. So that's really interesting. I'm not saying it's right. I'm not saying it's wrong. I'm just saying we're starting to see new models that are hacking these old institutions where the investor community is saying, we think Tesla's more valuable because they're not stuck in 100 years of bureaucratic policies and practices. They are not mired in that. They can think differently. And in a world that's changing fast, that's competitive advantage. And I have to tell you, when I share this with leaders today, Judith, I get a deer in the headlights look like, uh-oh, that's not comfortable. I'm like, that's right. But do you want me to tell do you want me to pretend it's not happening? We could do that,
I like that. But I think there's a couple of more things there to consider. I think one is that the psychological contract between employer and employee, it's not fractured, it's non-existent, in the sense that when I first started doing HR many years ago, it was expected that you would recruit to someone 75 to 8% of their ability to do the job, because you would train the rest, and it would give you at least 2, 3, 4, 5, whatever years of that individual, because they didn't know everything. So you'd be training them through. Whereas now people are looking to recruit 150% of the job. Right. So then back to your first one. So they do, and then they take maybe 5, 6 rounds of interviews, which is crazy. And then the person gets the job, but they're already able to do the job by far. So then they get bored.
Exactly.
And then they leave. And I think, the whole kind of like, why are people leaving? And is also linked to how you recruit them in the first place. If someone can do the job, but the only job that they can do is something that is not challenging for them, and then they get your job, and that gives them a stable income, because now it's taking, where it used to take 3 months to get another job, it could be a year, 18 months. So once they financially stable, however long that time takes, it's like Well, I need to find a new change now. Um, and I think
Mm,
that's directly responsible, I think, comes down to HR people who don't stand up to the CEO or the ops director and say, no, we need to take somebody that doesn't know how to do the job properly. And we then need to invest in training them. And I think there's a difference between having an organization that has a rapid turnaround of staff because they're trained and engaged and people want to come and it's healthy to
hmm.
one that has a rapid turnover because it's an unhealthy environment and people hate
Right.
it. There's a big difference. So you could have the two high turnover companies, but the one where people are trained and happy will have lower recruitment costs because the people line up to come and work in that place. And then you can set yourself up and go, you know what? We're going to be a department that only has someone for 2 years because, but then you, as you said before, then you set it up like people are going to be here for a couple of years. So this is the format that we're going to do it. And then it becomes something delightful as opposed to
Right.
something like, oh my gosh, it's going to cost me this much to recruit.
That's right. I mean, which bin do you want to invest your time in? And so if you agree with some of the premises that I said, if you're a
Mm.
listener and you're like, I don't, yeah, are people leaving companies faster than ever before? Yes, they are around the world. I have the data to prove it. It's a fact. The question I love to ask business leaders today is not why is that happening? Because usually when I say, why is that happening? It turns into some sort of anger towards some young generation that's disloyal and so forth. And I say, well, okay, we can talk about why turnover is increasing, but let's ask a more important question. Do you think it's going to change in the next 5 or 10 years? Do you think, for whatever reasons, that in 5 or 10 years, people will be staying at organizations longer? And what do you think the answer is 99% of the time?
Well,
No.
I hope they're saying no. They,
No, no. They
I
say,
hope they're
and it's
very
delivered,
deluded.
it's delivered with a look of reticence and great remorse. Like, you're probably right. And darn it. I'm like, okay, so if we look at the future and we see more choices, more transparency to opportunity, here's the harsh, difficult reality for the any organization today. Your talent can see more places to work than they ever have. They can see more ways they can use their background, education, experiences than they ever have. And they can see all the companies that are giving their employees things that you're not giving them. They can see more of what they don't have than ever before. And we've not operated in that kind of landscape for an extended period like we are today. When I was in Spain recently with some of the largest employers in the country. What's your biggest problem? Can't find the people. And when we do, they don't stay. Why is that? It's that young millennial generation, Gen Z, disloyal, career sugar high, shopping for promotion. They don't stick around. They want to be CEO, but they haven't even figured out where the bathroom is. And I said, okay, that's why you think it is the children that you raised, that generation, that's the problem. And then they go, oh, yeah, that's right. Whoopsie. I said, well, listen, if you could go back 40, 50 years ago and start your career out and see all these new Bitcoin, Airbnb, scooter companies, sexy, you know, businesses out there that are springing up and all these people that are doing, incredible things, you're going to still be in that insurance company 40 years later? Really? No, you're not. It's a buffet table of choice. And who's going to blame them for wanting to taste something different? And so we've got what we call, the researchers that I talked to about this whole dynamic, we've got career paralysis happening to a very significant degree because so many people are afraid of making the wrong decision of where they should go work. And what we're also seeing is in the universities, more people are changing majors at a faster rate than any time in history. Because they're looking out and say, what am I studying? I'm studying something because I want to own my financial freedom as soon as I can. So what should I study? And we've seen a massive shift from hard sciences into humanities. And as HR people, I go, let's go. It's all about liberal arts. But that's interesting. And what does it all mean? People switching majors. And what does it mean that the accounting industry has declared the accountant an endangered species, that more people are not going into that than at any time in history? It means we don't know. It means we know something different's happening. And so, as a coach to a lot of organizations and cities and countries, focused on talent strategy, I'm like, you better be really clear on why someone should stay in your organization today. Why your choice is the right choice for them, because they have a lot of choice right now. And if you map on top of that, more companies are comfortable employing people remotely than ever before. Now my geographic location doesn't matter as much as it used to. And those are all powerful agents, that are really, I really feel for businesses today, because this is not going to be an easier frontier. And that's why I say, if you want to get out of the war for recruiting talent, become the place that the best talent wants to go to. Then you don't have to go find them. They will find you. And that's culture, right? And that's our wheelhouse as HR people.
Yeah, exactly. I like that. And I think also it's so multi-layered, isn't it? It's the trust, you got to treat people right in the first place.
Yes.
We've been saying people are our finest assets for decades, and now it's actually true. And to do think about it.
They
And I
can't
think
deny it.
I think it's this kind of flat matrix. And also I think the biggest thing as well is like organizations survive on the goodwill of the employees. And it's something that they're beginning to realize. Now, in the past, the goodwill meant, yes, I will work for nothing because you've asked me to, or it's expected of me. Whereas now, Gen Z and some of the millennials are saying, well, I could work for nothing for the next 3 hours after work for a company that doesn't treat me very well, or I could build my personal brand up on TikTok and make some money. Now, it's not just the younguns that are deciding that's the way to go. Generation X and boomers and everybody else is also going, this company has not treated me well for years or
Right.
months. I could actually do something better.
Right.
But that discretional time isn't there.
Right.
It's just not available. And that means if you think about all the people that are coming in early, working through the lunch breaks and working the evening, and all those hours are disappearing, that's how many more people do you actually need to do the same role? And I think also when it comes to larger organizations, I think in a way we're a bit unfair of the ones in the past by saying overly bureaucratic and stuff. But if you think of the traditional conglomerate, you could actually learn and move through that company, whether it's even in the same country or different countries. If you were bothered to learn something new, you could move. And that's that whole thing about, not being overqualified for the role. So you're actually seeking to learn and do different things. And we can't have our cake and eat it. I guess you can't say, you know what, guys, we can give more money to the shareholders if we flatten the organization, reduce the amount of managers that we have, give responsibility to people who have never managed people or hard tasks, or we're never going to train them. We won't have appraisals and we won't do one-to-ones. We'll sack them if they aren't any good. We won't tell them we're going to sack them if they aren't any good. And why aren't they working for nothing for us? Why they got this TikTok thing going on the side? It's, as you said, it's much more transparent, and it requires good leadership, which requires mentoring, training, and investment in money, isn't it? I think maybe we organisations need to suddenly think, actually, this training is an investment budget. It's like it's an investment. It's not a liability.
Yeah, it is. And I don't think you have a choice. I think you have to
No,
do that.
there's no choice.
Yeah. Yeah.
Well, look, Steve, this has been great. And you definitely need to come back, and we need to have another little miniature rant.
Love that.
It's nice
Love
to
that.
have some HR rants. We don't do enough of that on the podcast.
Great. Great. And some of the venom coming our way is deserved. HR doesn't get it right all the time, but it is the easiest profession to target if the leaders throw all the ownership for the tough decisions onto HR, which I see happen a lot. Mm-hmm.
Yeah, and I think my last thing would be kind of a lot of people that I speak to in HR profession who want to move on and improve their influence or whatever. And I say one of the greatest things that you could do for your career is to learn other things other than HR, because if you're the chief people officer, of course you're good at HR. That's a given. So what are you actually bringing outside of that? And that means you need to learn business. You need to understand how marketing works, the industry you're in, or how to make that widget, because that will make your job better and you'll create more value.
Correct. I mean, what an incredible time to be in our field or in any field right now that you're looking over people. And we've just never seen a time where more things are changing. And the last thing I'll leave the audience with is we're so used to in difficult times having a benchmark or someone to turn to and saying, "Hey, when you were in this situation, what did you do?"
Yeah.
And we've not been in a post-pandemic universe before where more people are leaving companies faster than ever before. The psychology of the workforce is shifting. We've got this debate: should I work at home in my pajamas or in the office? That's getting really, really aggressive on both sides right now. And the truth is, we have to become the benchmark. You're going to have to take experiments with AI. You can't just wait because you're going to worry that your competitor is going to figure it out faster than you do. So you're going to have to do some experimenting, and it's really scary if you don't have a culture of experimentation. So
Mm.
that's what I tell people. Now's the time to be the benchmark. There is no benchmark for this moment, and that's going to require a little bit of risk taking and a little bit of discomfort. But great leaders recover quickly, and that's what we're going to have to figure out.
I love it. I love it. Thank you so much for coming on the show, Steve.
Thanks for having me.
You're welcome. And thank you out there for tuning into the Maverick Paradox podcast. I'm Juice Germain, your host, and I hope you've enjoyed today's conversation.
The Maverick Paradox Magazine. The Maverick Paradox Magazine is for the pathologically curious. Written by a swagger of socialized mavericks who are divergent thinkers, the magazine tackles the biggest issues affecting maverick leaders today. You might be a business owner or a leader within an organization who wants to have your thinking challenged, to be exposed to a diversity of thought, or to learn from diverse experts in their fields. If so, the Maverick Paradox Magazine is for you. Join the swagger at themaverickparadox.com and engage in the conversation.